Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roxanne Pereira. I'm the Accessibility, Equity, and Anti-Racism Program Coordinator here at AMANS. We would just like to begin with the land acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge that Nova Scotia is a home to over 13 bands and 42 First Nation communities, and we are in the traditional ancestral lands of the Mi'kmaq, known as the Mi'kmaq. As treaty people, we're committed to reconciliation as well as reconciliation. We would also like to recognize that Nova Scotia is home to over 50 African Nova Scotian communities whose culture, heritage, and histories have been and remain a key part of this province for more than 400 years. We honor and offer gratitude to those ancestors of African descent who came before us to this land. I'd also like to say that this Lunch and Learn is funded by the Accessibility Directorate. As well as we have two key speakers here today, Shelley Adams and Dan O'Brien. And today they'll be discussing guide dogs and service dogs. Shelley Adams is a manager advocacy for Atlantic Canada at CNIB. She has worked at CNIB for about 20 years. Shelley has lived with sight loss since birth and is very passionate about guide dog advocacy, as she has had a guide dog in her life for almost 18 years. Shelley is a registered social worker, has 2 children, a partner, and loves to listen to books and knit. For 30 years, Dan has had a successful career as a creative director and strategic brand manager in the nonprofit sector. However, his focus started shifting towards working with service dogs, guide dogs, and animal-assisted services over the last 10 years. He has received training from reputable international dog training academies and has extensive experience in hands-on dog training and service dog coaching. Dan's involvement in the field extends beyond training dogs. He has played a significant role in the development of national standards for animal-assisted services in Canada. He serves on the Animal Assisted Services Technical Committee in collaboration with the Canadian Foundation for Animal Assisted Support Services and the Standard Council for Canada. Dan's work with guide dogs has been recognized with the Arthur Napoli McGill Distinct Services, the highest honor from the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, CNIB, for his advocacy and support for Canadians with sight loss. He has raised 3 dogs for CNIB Guide Dog Program and currently serves as the chair for the Atlantic CNIB Strategic Advisory Board. I'd like to hand it over to Shelley and Don, who will be presenting on guide dogs and service dogs.
Great. Thank you so much, Roxanne. Dan and I are really happy to be here today chatting with you about guide dogs and service dogs. I was just going to start by telling a little bit about my story, why I decided to get a guide dog, the amazing things that I experienced because of having a guide dog, and also some of the challenges. And then we'll move into Dan talking about service dogs, guide dogs, laws, legislation, and all of those things. So I currently have a guide dog named Rookie. He is 6 years old. He's a black lab. I believe Dan has a photo of us in his presentation, so you'll get to see Rookie at some point. I'm at home today, so he's just napping on the couch downstairs. But he's been an amazing addition to my life. I actually got my first, so he's my 3rd guide dog. I got my first guide dog in September 2006. And I have always been a cat person. So whenever someone would ask me if I ever thought about getting a guide dog, I always said, nope, don't like dogs. I like cats. Don't ever want to have a dog. But I was living in Toronto in the early 2000s, and I met a lot of people who had guide dogs. And my vision was deteriorating, and I saw the amazing things that these dogs could do to enhance the independence of my colleagues and my friends. So one of my friends went to get her guide dog. At that time, we had to go away for a month to get our dogs, to get the training done. And she came back and she had this goofy, docile, sweet black lab named Lagoon. And I fell in love with him. I spent a lot of time with them out and about in Toronto. And I think she came back in May. In June, I applied to go get a dog. And in September, I went and spent a month in California, which was also amazing, training with my first guide dog, Buena. And a story that I always like to tell. So before that, I'll start with this. Before that, I was a cane user for a few years. I really didn't like using my cane. I did not feel confident. With a cane, you kind of have to find the obstacles to get around them. With a dog, they really just seamlessly take you around obstacles that may be on the sidewalk or in the mall, things like that, unless they're not able to get around that obstacle safely. Um, but then, you know, we're trained in how to deal with that kind of thing and continue to stay safe when there are obstacles. That's a whole other conversation I could have with you just about what guide dogs do and all of these things. But I'll just stick to the basics today. So, um, I remember, so before that, I was quite dependent on other people. I didn't want to go to stores on my own. I found them very confusing. I didn't want to ask for help. For the first probably 25 years of my life, I just tried my best to hide that my sight loss, pretend that, I was quote normal and just didn't want people to know, didn't want to be labeled, didn't want to have that stigma that unfortunately comes with having sight loss or being blind. Eventually, I matured a little bit, decided it didn't matter anymore, and who cares what other people think? This is my life, and I need to, keep myself safe, be independent, and as independent as I can. And again, once I saw my friends with their dogs and my colleagues, decided to go get a dog. So I mentioned that I didn't really go to stores alone. I was always with a friend or my partner, somebody. I didn't want to ask for help, all of those things. Once I got my dog and I learned the different tasks that I could teach him. So, when I was doing my training, I learned that I could teach him or her, sorry, it was her, um, a specific if I was at a strip mall and there's a specific door that I wanted her to learn, like there was a pharmacy that was near work, and I thought, well, that's a good place for her to know how to get to. I can pick up a lot of things there if I need to run an errand or something. And it's a smaller place. It's not as confusing as a big grocery store. So I taught her to find that store. And once I was confident enough to go to that strip mall alone, I remember calling my partner at the time and saying, "Hey, I'm heading to the pharmacy. Is there anything you need me to pick up?" And that was probably the first time in my life that I actually got to offer to pick something up for someone, instead of them being like, "Hey, I'm going to the store. Is there anything you need?" And that might sound like a really small thing, but for me, I mean, I still talk about it every time I talk about guide dogs. It was a huge um, change in my life, and it felt so good. And I felt, confident after that, learning all these different routes with my dog, learning, I can teach her how to find a pole at a bus stop. And as long as I'm close to that pole or close to those stairs or close to the elevator, I can say, find the steps, find the elevator, find the pole, and she'll take me right to it. We used food to, you know, so she would remember because labs love food. Um, but yeah, so and once I had her, there was no going back. I basically retired her the day I went to get my next dog, Pogo, who lives with Dan now. And I retired Pogo the day that I got Rookie. So I've been very lucky. I've never had to go without a dog. The wait times can be quite long. to get a dog. So usually I'll apply a couple years before I'm planning to retire my dog so that I'm on the list and able to get a dog hopefully right away when I retire. So or retire the dog. So Rookie will probably work for another 3 years as long as his health is good. And I will get a new dog at that point. So the independence that I have gained from having a dog is amazing. I feel confident, comfortable going out and about around Halifax. If we do get lost or turned around, at least I have him with me and I'm not, completely alone, wondering where I am. I use a lot of technology too. So if I do sort of get off course, I'll just ask my phone, where am I? And it'll give me an address and I'll be able to kind of figure out directions from there or just turn on the walking directions with Google Maps or something like that. So lots of technology. That's also a whole other discussion, um, but yeah, so that independence has been amazing. Before Dan gets into his presentation, I just wanted to bring up a couple of challenges that I face with my guide dog. And these are challenges that we should not be facing this day and age. I believe, I could be wrong. Dan, correct me if I am wrong, but I think guide dogs are the like oldest type of service dog there is, for helping people with disabilities. And the fact that we still get denied access to hotels, restaurants, taxis, they're the worst culprits, ride shares. Um, that just should not be happening. So part of my role at CNIB is doing advocacy, educating businesses on the legislation, on our rights as people with who are blind. And Dan will get a little bit more into that, but like I said, taxis are the biggest culprit. Every time I call for a taxi, even if I put a note in the app saying I have my guide dog, I still have that bit of anxiety as they pull up and I walk towards their car. Are they going to make a comment? Are they going to say they can't take me? Are they going to, is there going to be an issue every time? And um, I know the companies that are way better than other companies, so I will tend to, use those companies. I've never been denied access to a restaurant or a hotel, but I've definitely a few times had people, I think it's education. They don't realize that, you know, that I have a guide dog. They're not sure what kind of they just see the dog and they're like, no dogs in here. And usually once I say, it's a guide dog or I talk to the manager and it's a guide dog, say it's guide dog, the, everything's fine. Um, but again, as Dan will get into, there are different types of service dogs. There are fake service dogs. There's guide dogs. There's emotional support dogs. And that's something we really want to talk about today is those differences, what the legislation is for each type of dog, just so people know and are aware. And these are things that we need to educate anyone and everyone that we can on so that they understand. We have a lot of people who are new to our country who may not understand the laws here. So, there's just a lot of education that needs to be done, which is why we are here today. Giving you guys some education. And afterwards, Roxanne, I'll send you a guide dog etiquette document that you can share out to people if you would. I think I actually may have sent it to you before, but I can resend that if you don't have it. And people can feel free to distribute that etiquette document to anyone and everyone that you would like to distribute it to. And I think at the end of Dan's presentation, I will be back to talk a little bit more about guide dog etiquette. So does anyone have any questions for me before I pass it over to Dan? And there will be time at the end too to ask more questions. All right, Dan, I will hand it over to you and I'm going to mute myself.
All right. Thanks, Shelley. Oops. All right. All right, as Shelley said, I'll be talking about guide dogs and service dogs. guide dogs are also service dogs. 1 second, let me make sure this is working for me. There we go. In Nova Scotia, we are watched over by two bills. We have a bill called Bill number 161, which is the Service Dog Act. And then we have a Blind Persons Act. The Blind Persons Act takes care of guide dogs specifically. Service Dog Act takes care of all other certified service dogs, and I'll get into what certification means with service dogs. Roxanne, are we seeing my screen okay? Good. So this presentation is called Nova Scotia Dogs in Service. And so I'm here as part of my, I have a nonprofit group called Service and Assistance Dogs of the Atlantic Provinces, or Service Dogs Atlantic for short. And I'm a trauma-informed service dog coach with that group. And I'm also the director of canine development and co-chair. Oops. 1 second here. Sorry. Having a hard time seeing my screen here. Just 1 second. All right, so there's a number of different kinds of dogs in therapy. We have what are called therapy dogs, guide dogs, service dogs, emotional support dogs. What's the difference? And what is the law? So it's confusing to a lot of people how this works. So we're going to just go over a quick survey of how this is going to work for us. Can you tell the difference? Here's a few dogs to look at. And can you tell which is which? There's a service dog here. There's a guide dog, and there is a therapy dog in this group. And there we go. So service dogs can be any breed, almost any breed of dog. And guide dogs are typically these days are Labrador retrievers or lab crosses with Goldens. In the old days, you'd see a lot of, and you still do see some German Shepherds. And again, therapy dogs can be any kind of dog. And then we have pet dogs. You'll notice what's missing here are emotional support dogs, and we'll get into what that means. This is a therapy dog. That happens to be my old dog, Thomas, who worked as a therapy dog at the Children's Hospital for many years. Therapy dogs are volunteers that visit people with their person in many therapeutic settings, such as hospitals, nursing homes, airports, crisis scenes, schools, and courtrooms, etc. The therapy dog, there's a few therapy dog groups here in Nova Scotia. The main one is administered by St. John Ambulance, and anyone can ask for a therapy dog to visit their place. So they just have to go onto the website and ask for a service dog or a group of service dogs to come to help out or just to visit. Service dogs are also co-workers that work with licensed and certified animal assistant therapists or practitioners to help people in therapy, education, or rehabilitation settings. And these are special therapy dogs that have been specially trained to work with therapists and such. They only have access to to work with their therapists. And then we have, I'm having a hard time seeing my screen here. What kind of access do, sorry, trying to get rid of some things so I can read my own screen. So access is limited with these dogs, and they don't have regular access to public places like service dogs and guide dogs do. They can only be invited into places and they don't have any legal public access rights. Next, we're going to talk about guide dogs. There's Shelley. That's a picture of Shelley with Rookie, her current guide dog, who was trained here in trained in Canada at the CNIB guide dog campus in Carleton, Ontario. Guide dogs are the eyes for someone with vision loss, and they're trained to use what's called intelligent disobedience, which means they access danger and decide against to act. Sorry, they access danger and decide to act against the request of their person if danger is present. So, for instance, if they're going to cross the street and there's a car coming and the blind person can't see the car, the dog will not go forward, they'll stop. This is a really special kind of training that only guide dogs have. Again, it's called intelligent disobedience. Guide dogs are the most highly trained of the service dogs. They are protection for the people with sight loss. They're also considered assistive technology, which means they are legally considered part of the person's body and vice versa. So they are acting as the eyes for these folks like Shelley who need to move through the world. And guide dogs have full public access. They can go anywhere their person goes. In Nova Scotia, the rights of guide dogs and their handlers are covered under the Blind Persons Act. Lose it here. Next, we have service dogs. This is in the picture there is one of the service dogs I'm training right now. His name is Rafa. He's about to be certified soon. So service dogs could be mobility dogs. They assist people who have movement challenges, so they have independence, and typically those with people who have like cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, spinal injuries, etc. And they help support these people through their mobility. They can also be psychiatric dogs. So they would assist people who have a severe mental health condition, which greatly interferes with their functions. Typically, those are PTSD, bipolar, schizophrenia, panic disorders, autism, anxiety, etc. And then we have medical alert dogs that alert a person to avoid medical crisis, typically for a diabetic attack, seizure, severe allergic reactions, etc. And all of these dogs are specifically task trained to do work for their people. So whether it's mobility, psychiatric, or medical alert, they all have very specific tasks that they perform. Certified service dogs, which means they have been certified through the Service Dog Act, have full access to anywhere their person goes, the same as guide dogs. In Nova Scotia, the rights of service dogs and their handlers are covered under the Service Dog Act. Besides both the Service Dog Act and the Blind Persons Act, guide dogs and service dogs are also protected by human rights legislation across Canada. What just appeared there right next to that little picture of Rafa is the certification card that every service dog needs to carry. If the dog is certified to be a service dog, they will have this card. That means that they've been validated by the Department of Justice and in Nova Scotia, and that's the only way that they have public access rights. This doesn't apply to guide dog. Guide dogs don't need to have this card. Guide dogs are, again, covered under the Blind Persons Act, and they have public access without any kind of identification. Emotional support dogs. Emotional support dogs are pets. A dog that you have a deep bond with and can provide emotional support throughout the ups and downs of life. A dog that is a companion to you while you share a mutual connection throughout the dog's lifespan. Emotional support dogs are not working dogs of any kind. They are not assistance dogs. They are not dogs that have legal access to any public space where animals are not permitted. ESA, emotional support dogs, or ESA dogs, very simply are not a thing. We're actually trying to dissuade people from even using the term emotional support dog because they are not recognized as a working dog. They are simply pets. We're struggling with some of the provinces right now to try and remove emotional support dogs from their public speak and to try and get it out of the service dog world.
Dan, I just wanted to, oh, sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
interject for a minute to, you know, it's hard enough going into a store that allows pets like Home Depot or Kent or places like that with my guide dog, because even though he is well trained and he is trained to ignore other dogs, he is still a dog. He's not perfect. So if there is a dog inside a store or something, like it can be distracting and it puts my safety in jeopardy. And people, I mean, but dogs are allowed in certain stores, so I just know that going into those stores. But for people who have emotional support dogs and they feel they have the right to take them everywhere, and store owners sometimes are nervous to say anything, or they don't know, maybe it's wearing a vest and so they're like, oh, it must be a service dog. um Sometimes emotional support dogs and pet dogs too are not well trained. They have not been socialized. Like my dog's been socialized since 8 weeks old to be out in public, to be in restaurants, to be in stores, to be around a lot of people. And he's been trained to act accordingly, act professionally in those situations. Again, he's a dog, so there are times, especially if he sees another guide dog, he gets excited, but I know how to deal with that. And we have our little, I'll say discipline that we do, but it's nothing major. It's mostly just getting him to sit and kind of waiting till that distraction has passed. But yeah, so emotional support dogs can be difficult for people with service dogs to deal with. So having this legislation in place, all over the country, is going to be really helpful for that.
And we are working on trying to get that passed somehow through a national board, and I'm doing that through a technical committee that I work on. It's going to take years to happen, but we're hoping that it'll happen sooner. The other problem is you can go online anywhere and buy a vest and put emotional support dog on it, or even service dog. Through the act, both the Blind Persons Act and Bill 161, which is the Service Dog Act, there are fines attached to that. So if you have a dog that you're taking out into public and you pretend it's a service dog, you can be fined anywhere from $500 up to $3,000 at the moment, and people are being fined now because there's so much of it happening. And these fake service dogs or emotional support dogs, being in public places, as Shelley says, cause a clear and present danger to people, especially blind people, because again, these dogs are the eyes for these people. So if the dog is distracted, it's going to be a real danger for the person who's trying to maneuver themselves through the world with this dog, and it could cause major problems. It's hard enough with just certified service dogs out there when like Shelley says, you go to Home Depot and there's dogs running around all over the place. It's difficult when people bring their bad dogs out into public for us, but it is the world that we live in. And we do try and train the dogs to ignore all of this, but again, when they get approached by a dog, that's a difficult dog to deal with. There's not much you can do. I mean, we all have probably been approached by a dog on the street that we didn't want to come near us. Imagine if you're walking down the street and you're blind and that happens. It's very, very difficult. So there's a lot of other kinds of working dogs. These are there's farm dogs, there's drug dogs, there's search and rescue dogs, police dogs, dogs that work in airports. These dogs have access only to the places and cities in which they work. There's no legislation that allows them access to public spaces where they do not work. So, for instance, police dogs cannot just put on a vest and go into a restaurant or into a mall. They can go there if they're working, if they've been called to do the work. Dogs in airports can work in airports. They can do this work. They're not validated to be in public settings. So service dogs have to go through a validation process through the Department of Justice here. It's overseen by Department of Justice. It is through the St. John Ambulance. I'm a validator for service dogs, for instance. These dogs have to go through 40 tasks to show that they are able to be in public. We're not looking to see what they do for the person. We're not allowed to ask what they do for the person. That's private information. But what we can do is make sure that the dog can pass these 40 different tasks that allow them to be safely in the public. Most pet dogs could never pass this test. So these are highly trained dogs that are being certified. There's Shelley. So Shelley, this is our section on guide dog etiquette. If you want to jump in here. So the first slide talks about how you can help people when you see someone with a guide dog.
Yeah, so I haven't seen Dan's slides, so I may be speaking a little bit off of what they say, but the etiquette, the main thing I tell people is if you see a guide dog or a service dog, as hard as it is, pretend they are not there. If I am standing at a street corner, using my ears, assessing when it's safe to cross the street, it's very distracting, and it's disorienting when someone comes up beside us and starts patting the dog, talking to the dog. Those of you who know dogs, talking is just as bad as patting. They get excited, especially when you use the cutesy, "Oh my goodness, you're so cute." And I do get that a lot. People be like, "Oh, I know I'm not supposed to pat you, but you're just so beautiful and what an amazing dog." And, that could get a dog just as excited as touching the dog. So do not pat the dog. Do not talk to the dog. Don't even make eye contact with the dog, because when they have their harness on, their vest, their harness, whatever it is, they are working. My dog, when the harness is on, he knows his demeanor changes. He becomes on duty, focused, and he's ready to work, and he loves working. He walks right into his harness when I hold it up when we're about to go out somewhere. So he loves working. But he also loves it when I take the harness off, and I will do that if I'm, I don't know, just like at an event, and somebody wants to pat him, and we're just, sitting somewhere. I'm not trying to walk around, get from A to B. I'll stop. I'll say, "Hey, I can take his harness off if you want to give him a little pat." And so I'll do that. And then they always appreciate it so much, because everybody seems to want to pat a guide dog because they're just so special. So he gets a little excited, he wiggles, and he lets them pat him. I'll lay on his back and get them to pat his belly. And then I put the harness back on, and he's back on duty. And pretty much ignoring people unless it's some of his favorite people. Like he knows Dan very well. So it's there's nothing I can do when Rookie sees Dan, even if he's in harness, he just he gets super excited. So I can get him to sit and, you know, try to ignore Dan, but he's the same way with my partner. So there's a few close people in your life that the dog's going to be a little more um, excited to see, even when they're working. But for the most part, he's very focused when he has his harness on. You never want to feed a dog either. I know it's tempting to want to give them treats or table scraps, which I don't ever do with dogs, but he gets treats, but yeah, table scraps, no. Um, they have to stay very fit, very healthy. They need to adhere to a strict diet because you don't want them gaining too much weight. It's going to hurt their hips. They're on the move all the time. I want my dogs to be able to work as long as possible, although I do usually retire them at 9. 10 is the average age, but I usually retire them at 9, just to give them an extra year of retirement. Um, but you need to stay strict. So even the treats that I do give him are very healthy treats. Um, so yeah, somebody feeding him. There was a guy once I heard about who his dog was gaining weight like crazy. I mean, labs do. If they eat anything extra, they're gonna gain pounds. And he had no idea why his guide dog was gaining weight. And it's because he went to this particular coffee shop every day, and every day one of the people that works there was coming over and feeding him a donut. And the guy didn't even know because the dogs, I mean, they're smart too, right? He was so sneaky. He would like move his head slightly, grab the donut, and kind of just eat it. And you're holding the leash when you're sitting at a restaurant or somewhere with your dog. You're not holding their harness handle, which gives you a lot more feedback into what they're doing. So yeah, that's what was going on with that guy. So again, like don't don't sneak dogs food. Don't feed them. Pretend they're not there. We always say harness on, hands off. Am I forgetting something, Dan? I feel like
Oh, no, I
I
think
might
I
be.
covered it pretty
No
well
talking,
there.
no touching, no feeding.
Yeah, no, those are the basic um how if somebody saw you, Shelley, on a corner and they wanted to help you, what
Mhm.
would be a way for them to approach you to do that?
Yeah, so if you are, if you do want to, if you see somebody, can be with a cane or could be with a dog, and you want to approach them to offer assistance. Um, I mean, sometimes people will come up and grab people and sort of drag them across the street. Don't do that. That's never actually happened to me, but I have friends that it's happened to. A lot of times people will just say, "Oh, it's safe to cross," or "Do you need any assistance crossing or anything like that?" And it depends on the day. Like I'm a confident traveler. Sometimes I'll say yes just because I know that it'll make that person feel good. Other times I'll say no, no, I'm fine. Thank you so much for asking, though. I really appreciate it. So, yeah, it just depends, but never grab somebody's arm or harness handle or white cane or anything. That maybe sounds like common sense, but all of these things have happened to people I know. And they get dragged across the street, and it's very disconcerting when you don't know who's grabbing onto you and where they're taking you. So,
The other thing you
yeah.
could mention is if you're out walking your pet dog, how you would and you encounter someone with a guide dog or a service dog.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Sometimes when we're out walking, we'll walk around the neighborhood. There's lots of pet dogs. I find people in my neighborhood are quite respectful of if I am coming down the street, working the dog, they'll see him and they'll either, move to the side, cross the road. Um, but there are times where, again, sometimes, especially if the dog is barking or making noise and carrying on, my dog will just completely ignore them. But what if it's another cute lab and he's like, ooh, that dog's like me. I want to play with him. He might start showing some interest, my dog. And sometimes people will take that as, oh, well, I'm just going to take my dog right up to him then and let them say hi. And that can be that is very distracting and not the right thing to do. Because then I have to say to my dog, leave it, leave it. Nope, let's keep going, leave it. And, you know, we we carry on that way, but he's also super distracted because the person is letting their dog come close to him and try to play with him. There's other people who will have their dogs off leash and just have no control over them. And that is also really, really distracting for my dog when we're out working. So he definitely gets playtime. He has a few dogs in his life that he plays with when he's off harness in a fenced in area because they're also not allowed to play at regular dog parks because you don't know those other dogs. They're not well trained. They could be fine, but you just don't know if it's a strange dog. They could hurt my dog and that could end his career. He could be terrified of dogs after that. You don't know the trauma that your dog's going to go through if they get attacked by another dog or anything like that. So we do have a service dog park here in Halifax at Alman and Oxford where I have a backyard that's fenced in, so I'm lucky that way. I can let him play in my backyard with dogs that we know. But there is the service dog park as well, and you have to have access to that. And we need more of those throughout Canada. I think we might be the only place in Canada with a service dog park,
think
but
there
I've heard
might
of
be one,
other
there might be one in
one more.
Winnipeg now. We were the first
Okay.
one.
Yeah, we were the first one, and we're getting more and more inquiries about that. And they're great. You have to have a fob from the city to get in, and Dan and I will take our dogs there sometimes to play because our dogs know each other, and it's a safe space. And he has service dogs in training and too, so um, I'll meet other guide dog handlers there, and we'll let the dogs play. But yeah, taking them to a regular dog park or letting them play with strange dogs that you don't know is something that I'm not able to do.
That's great. Thanks, Shelley. So this is a good time for questions. If anyone has any questions for us.
Quiet group.
Oh, I see Michelle's raised her hand.
Yeah, hi, I'm Michelle. So I'm at a municipality and I am drafting an accessibility policy that does have a service dog section. So this was really helpful for me. Thankfully, I knew quite a lot of it. The one thing that I've seen come up a lot is the phrase service animals is used. And so I just want to be clear when we're looking at like the Blind Persons Act and the Nova Scotia Service Dog Act, those are specifically relating to dogs. Is it possible for there to be other animals that are under legislation, or are they all classified as like an emotional support animal?
In Nova Scotia, only dogs.
Okay.
There's no other animal that is can be certified as a service
Okay.
dog. And again, emotional support is not a thing. It's not considered.
Yeah.
But right now, New Brunswick has actually I've just seen recently that they have in their public when they're sort of disseminating information about service dogs, they do have emotional support dogs in there as a thing. We're trying to talk them into removing that. They don't have any legislation that covers this.
Or
But
animals, you mean, Dan?
Well, animals in
Sorry.
general. But,
Okay.
yeah, so they're saying emotional support animals are a thing and could possibly have public access. It's not true. They don't.
Okay.
It's not.
Thank you. And the other question I had is related to certification. Is the card from the Department of Justice, is that the only form of certification? Like, can there be certification from, because something I've seen in other policies in Ontario and things is that you can, you could get certification from like a medical professional that says that you need this dog on account of a specific disability.
Well, part of the certification in Nova Scotia is you need to have that already. So you apply for certification through the Department of Justice, and there's a long there's about a 30-page document you have to fill out for that, and that includes having your doctor saying that you need to have this dog for health reasons.
Thank you. That clarifies things.
That information is all kept very private by Department of Justice. That never goes out of their office at all. So me as a validator, I never see that. I just know that they passed it all. All I ever see is a name and a phone number, and then they get they're only being validated by us for public access.
Thank you.
Dan, I have a question.
Yeah.
What if someone comes from another province and has a service dog and well, first of all, are businesses allowed to ask for that certification card? Like, are they
Yes.
allowed to ask somebody, is this a certified service dog? Do you have your identification with you?
Yes, they're allowed to ask for identification. They're allowed to ask what service the dog performs for you. They're not allowed to ask what your medical condition is or why you need a service dog. They can ask those. Those are the only questions they're legally allowed to ask. We have people come from, because there's only right now 3 provinces in Canada that do certification. So there's Nova Scotia, Alberta, and British Columbia. That's starting to change. It sounds like we're going to have more places doing validations and certifications across the country. But we actually have people come all the way from Ontario to get certified here, and so they can have a card to help them travel, because it's a lot easier to travel when you have a card that says that you're validated for public access.
So even if they come from Ontario and they get certified here, they get a card here from here. Does it say Nova Scotia on it, or is it just like a generic Canadian?
It says Nova Scotia, and but their hope is that it'll be recognized further afield than Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia, Alberta, and British Columbia are well known across the country, and all the airlines know that we do public access certification. So most of them are pretty good about accepting these cards as being, and you have to also renew every 2 years. It's not, you just don't get it once. It's not like a driver's license where you go have a test once and then you get it forever. You have to, and every time you get a new dog, recertify, but you have to be certified every 2 years right now. Yeah. And the cost for certification is $185.
And that's where it differs with guide dogs. So I received rookie in 2020, and that's it. There's no, he's guide dog until he retires. There's no more. He doesn't have to, recertify or anything like that. Guide dogs don't have to go through that. Once you receive your dog, unless something happens, they are a guide dog until they retire.
And a lot of the reason for that is that they're so highly trained guide dogs compared to almost any other kind of service dog there. And they're also working regular. So most guide dogs work every day. They go out to work every day. Service dogs, not necessarily. Some service dogs will work, once or twice a week or something. They don't have to perform their tasks or their duties super regularly. Guide dogs, on the other hand, are working all the time. But just to put a point on what Shelley was saying too, that all of these dogs, in one of the thoughts for the general public out there is that these dogs are being tortured to do this work.
Yes.
None of these dogs do this work.
Your poor dog. I hear that once in a while. Your poor dog, and I'm like, he gets to come everywhere with me. He's good.
Go through what we call a behavior analysis when they're puppies. So we can tell right away whether these dogs are going to be consenting to do this work or not. We know early on. And if the dogs don't want to work anymore, they stop working. Just like Shelley's Pogo did, he decided his hips were hurting. He had arthritis, and he just decided one day he wasn't going to work anymore. And that's fine. We have to deal with that as people. And also these dogs, once their vests and their harnesses are off, they're just dogs. They run around, they do crazy dog stuff, and they have a lot of fun. They chew on bones and they play bitey face with their friends. They're just dogs. As soon as the vest or the harness goes on, they're working, and they love to work. These dogs all genuinely love to do the work that they're doing. Any more questions?
I have a quick question. With the demographics for Nova Scotia changing and new immigrants coming in, and with there'll also be a potential, there might be guide dogs coming in from other countries. Is there a process to get them certified? Or is it the same process as getting a guide dog certified right now?
Well, guide dogs wouldn't be certified guide dog. We have a lot of guide dogs here. I mean, CNIB only started, I think, what is it, 6 years ago now, Shelley?
Yeah, 2018 or 17, 2018, yeah.
Well, previous to that, most guide dogs you saw in Canada, all guide dogs you saw in Canada came from, well, I'd say the majority of them come from the States, from New Jersey, California, and in a few other places in the States. There were a few Canadian groups that were training guide dogs. So if the guide dog comes from a certified, a legitimate guide dog group, then yeah, they're fine coming in. They don't need to be retested or anything. Service dogs, on the other hand, would have to be validated if they came from another place. Even if they come with a validation, they would have to be revalidated for Nova Scotia to be part of the Service Dog Act here.
Guide dogs are covered under I can't remember the acronym, you might remember, but it's an international body.
Yes. Yeah. Well, all the guide dog schools, any guide dog schools
all the guide dogs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Guide dog schools are covered under the International Guide Dog Association. Yeah.
And also, like, there are certain countries, if I was going to travel to certain countries, I may not be permitted to bring my guide dog, or I may not want to bring my guide dog. I'm thinking of Mexico in particular. Like, different countries have wild dogs just running around. People, they're not domesticated in all countries like they are here. So there's a lot of countries that would never have seen a guide dog, don't have guide dog schools, and countries that I would never take my dog to for that reason, because he may not be safe. So there's considerations like that to make as well, to take into consideration. Yeah. Anything else?
I can't raise my hand on the screen for some reason.
That's okay. Go ahead.
My name's Ashley. I'm the CAO of a town, but oddly, I also run a dog training business on the side. So this whole seminar kind of intrigued me just from a town perspective and personal perspective. And both my dogs have been therapy dogs in the past, where I've gone in and kind of volunteered through St. John Ambulance and done that type of thing. But I do get a few odd people that reach out to me through my business and ask if I do emotional support dog training. And I'm like, no, I just do like life skills training. And it just makes me a bit uncomfortable not knowing the lingo. And I get very annoyed when people, like, I take my dogs in some of the stores as well because my dogs are good. But if I see somebody with a guide dog, I beeline the other way because it's not appropriate, I don't think, to have, to cause a distraction. But I've had different people tell me, well, this is going to be an emotional support dog. And I'm like, yeah, but what does that mean? Like, is it a service dog? Because even I, before this presentation, knew there was differences, but it wasn't until that chart got laid out, and I don't know if somebody can bring that chart back up again, but it literally said, I think it started with guide dog, service dog, emotional support dog, and then there was a fourth one, I can't remember. But the big one that I'm seeing down around this area is support dogs for PTSD. And I'm not really sure, like, I actually did get reached out to by an organization that wanted to know if they could send dogs to my puppy classes as a first step in the certification process. And I'm like, yeah, but this is what I do. I don't do anything special. I don't really understand what your organization does. Like, this is what I do. If you want to send people here, fine. But so I don't really understand if PTSD is something that actually is covered, because some people tell me it is, and then some people tell me it's not. And I'm sure it's covered under the emotional support dog description.
It's actually covered under psychological support dogs. So they would.
Is that under the service dog realm though?
Service dogs, yes. I train dogs for
Okay.
PTSD, and but they're considered psychological support dogs, not emotional support
Okay.
dogs. Psychological support dog, but that is a service dog. Yeah. But that's
Okay.
that's very specialized training that these dogs have to be able to be a service dog. They have to be trained to be task specific. So they're specifically trained to do tasks for these people, depending on
And they
what
have to pass those 40 criteria, right?
well, to get
become
public access, they need to pass the criteria. First, they have to apply for that through Department of Justice, and then that gets passed on to the St. John Ambulance to do the certification work, which is what I.
But I think the people that I've spoken to, they're just taking their personal pet, doing some training with it, and then getting certified. And I don't understand how that works.
You can do that if they're task trained specifically, and they're well trained for public access. You can train your own service dog. It is possible to do it.
Okay.
But it's daunting. It's not an easy thing to do. It depends on, and it's not an easy thing to get through the Department of Justice paperwork to show that you're ready to happen, right? So a lot of people are rejected at that level before they you also have to have a doctor sign off on that, saying that you need to have this dog for medical reasons.
And I just did a quick Google search, service dog certifications, and this website came up and it says register your service dog, register your emotional support animal certification, register your therapy dog. And I think it's a Canadian website, it's not a Nova Scotia website. But are you finding that people are going online and finding these different things and then thinking that they have some sort of ability to do what they want with their dog and it's certified? Or
most people are doing that knowing that they're doing something they're not supposed to do. But those are fake service dogs, and those people can be fined up to $3,000 if they're caught doing that. If they're in a place with a service dog and they show one of these cards that comes from this Canadian Service Dog Association or whatever they call themselves, they can be fined up to $3,000.
So basically, a guide dog doesn't need to have a certification because it's covered under a different act, but it can. But your actual service dogs have to have a card through the Department of Justice in Nova Scotia. If you don't have that, then it's not allowed everywhere, and then it's just considered an emotional support dog
or a pet. I don't like to use emotional support dog. It's a pet.
Yeah.
Guide dogs are pretty easy to see. I mean, guide dogs wear a harness and they're with a blind person, so it's pretty obvious that a guide dog is a working dog.
Yeah.
Service dogs.
It's hard to fake that, but I'm sure people try.
It does put a challenge on businesses though, because some people get very upset when they're asked for their card and then produce something that they say, well, this is not legitimate, and then the person gets mad, kicks up a stink, makes a big Facebook post that the business wouldn't let them and their service dog into their restaurant. And I've just seen that a bit around here in our town specifically. So I guess
And the fact is, you do not have to certify your service dog. You don't have to do it. And the Human Rights Act will protect someone by just saying that my dog is a service dog. But no one has ever successfully gone through that. No one can afford to do it, for one thing. It would cost you a fortune to hire a lawyer and put a Human Rights Act up and say I tried to bring my dog into this place and didn't,
Mhm.
This is why we're trying to pass a national Service Dog Act, which is very difficult. It's been very difficult to do, but we're working on that. But because
So
of that,
like,
Human Rights Act does protect people because you can say anything about
That's the scary part. You can just say it and then you shouldn't get in trouble. Like, or you're not going to get in trouble really. So it's like, no, who is going to actually get fined? Where's the
no one's
precedent
ever,
going to be set?
and no one's ever successfully launched a human rights complaint against using a dog or against any place been rejecting a dog because it's not a service dog. So.
Sorry, we're just
So-
conscious of time over here and it's 1 o'clock. So Michelle, if you want to share your comment, we'll close up this lunch and learn.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was just what we were just talking about when people don't have certification. Is something that I'm concerned about, the wording in my policy. And I was just wondering if either of you knew if you or knew of anyone in your organizations might have capacity to just review the section in my policy on service dogs and see what you thought about it and if it was acceptable.
You can send that to me actually, Michelle, because that's kind of what we're doing. We're actually in the midst right now of trying to rework the bill, the Service Dog Act bill. So I'm pretty well versed in the language there. So if you want to do that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I think Roxanne probably has my email address.
Yes, I do. I'll forward it to you, Michelle.
Thank
I
you.
just want to thank Dan and thank Shelley so much for this informative lunch and learn. It was really great information that I'm sure all of us are going to take back to our municipal staff as well as all the work that we're doing on the ground. So I do appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thanks for
Roxanne.
having us.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
will we have access to this presentation?
Yes, so it is going to be online. It's going to be on our YouTube website as well as it will be at the Municipal Ideas website as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.